And there we go, everyone. Welcome back to another episode in today. And if you're watching us live, thank you for joining in live. And if you're watching us as part of the recording, why not consider joining in live by joining into the Facebook group and following the questions. And you can follow these along live and pose your questions in there. Forgive us for the time off, but we're back following our episode on the traitors. Wonderful show. We thought we'd take a little look at game theory. Now, game theory itself is one of those things that is a topic, or at the very least, a title that many people seem to be aware of as it orbits their working world. Some people will have heard it as part of the TV show Prison Break. Some people have used it in class. Essentially, it began as a mathematical framework created by John van Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern to explain how people make decisions when two things are true. Your outcome depends partly on what someone else does. So you must predict their behavior while they predict yours. Most real human behavior fits that pattern of prediction. It's a very basic pattern. Every negotiation, every interview, every attempt at something deceptive, every conflict or cooperation scenario, every threat assessment. Game theory creates structured models that let you map motives, map the payoffs, map the risks, map the likely or the unlikely behaviors that occur. So one thing to pay attention to as we are talking about this is that when we reference the word game, it's not like somebody is rolling a dice and moving counters on a board. Game within the game theory approach refers to any situation where a decision needs to be made. Anything. That can be from crossing the street to how you turn your car in a direction to how you interact with someone else as part of an interview. So, Bob, what's been your experience of this deep rabbit hole we're about to start tumbling down?
Yeah, it certainly is a rabbit hole. Before we start, I must say that the lighting in this house is not very good. We're in sort of twilight time here, and I look a bit like that American president. I'm orange. So I apologise for that. I got into game theory when I started looking at behavioural intelligence, and they fit so well together. Because behavioural intelligence is looking at the outcomes of game theory and how it affects individuals. This is your specialist subject, Ben, so I won't go too much into it. But for me, it goes so much alongside behavioural economics and nudging and decision making in that regard. And in that regard, we are being gamified, if you want, or nudged nearly every single day. And it's as simple as, I'll give you an example. I'm in a networking group, and they have decided to go more formal networking sort of structure. And so they have league tables of groups that are doing better every week. And to me, I look on everything as fuel or friction. What people do adds fuel to you, or it adds friction to you, and that certainly was a friction point for me, because for me, the type of networking I like is where it's about helping each other rather than tables. So that's just an example, but it's everywhere, isn't it? It's when you click on something on the internet and it says 18 other people are looking at this.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why it fascinates me, is because it is an economical look at the psychology behind decisions, right? And like I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, and we're talking about hooks. Like 5 things that allow you to do this. Wash your clothes with Daz. Now it's even whiter than before. So whiter, your tea towels will look see-through. This type of thing. And like my explanation was, I don't really care about the hook. The hook does nothing for me. It doesn't. Like the looks behind these terms and how they're catchy and the rule of three and alliteration and all of these guiding principles that go into it. What I'm stopping for is not the hook. It is the connection that I make to the individual or the material that's immediately communicated. The hook doesn't do anything for me. It would be like somebody, drinking an energy drink because it's called Monster and not because of the apparent things that they get on the back of it as a result of the energy therein. But that's just me. Hooks may appeal to zillions of other people in zillions of different ways. As you mentioned, nudging, that the same nudge that we've referenced before with the policeman sticker in the shop window. Some people might not notice it. Some people might laugh at it. Some people might find it curious. Some people might be deterred by these things that are going on. The game theoretic approach to that is what it does to the behavior of all of those that enter the store. Right? That's the function of it. And one of the situations, one of the games that comes out of the game theory fundamentals is called the prisoner's dilemma. It's the model that is relevant to psychologists. It's relevant to neuroscientists. It's relevant to military strategists, behavioral scientists, investigators. Right? When it highlights how humans often choose suboptimal actions out of fear or uncertainty or misread incentives, and that's a lot of the time that's precisely what we observe in real life investigative scenarios, in interviews, in negotiations, in surveillance scenarios. The one that most people would have probably come across with the prisoner's dilemma is the police procedural dramas where one policeman's talking to one person about their friend in the other room that's probably singing like a bird. They're giving you up. What are you going to do with this? And those kinds of situations. So what game theory is really looking to influence, if you want to think of it that way, is the understanding of the implication of a decision past its cause and effect. So it's cause and effect that then causes what effect, that then causes what effect, and seeing how far you can follow those chains of reasoning without getting into the realm of it's kind of become a bit of a swear word to me, but without getting into the realm of guesswork. Yeah. But like it, from a behavioral intelligence perspective, and the behavioral science that connects it, it's not just about what people do. It's about why they do it and why they do it under what specific constraints or incentives, and so how would you encourage people to start applying that thinking pattern to it in terms of like, so if I'm aware that Ben is an extroverted individual that talks with his hands a lot and seems to say 4,000 word sentences when 8 words will do. How is that going to behave in a group setting when there is this to discover? How would one practice thinking about those types of things? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can, I've come from it from a totally behavioral intelligence point of view. And so my view of game theory is probably coloured a little bit like that. But I think there's a great example that's on the internet, anyone can access it. And it's from the City of London Police, and it's a fraud awareness thing they did, where they took over a coffee shop somewhere and they videoed it, and they were offering the hook, like you talked about earlier, was they was offering free coffee and a pastry if people would like their Facebook page. And so they were using the reward part of game theory, but also the social part of nudging. because people were queuing up to do this. And then when they went in the store, they were told to tell the person behind the counter that they'd liked their Facebook page, and then there was people in a van outside would suddenly start to investigate that person, their Facebook page, etc., etc. And then rather than just write their name on the side of the cup, they'd write all the information they know about them on the side of it. And I just think that's a great example of using positive game theory because it's educating people and they're showing them how they got to that point. Although, people were dumbfounded that they did it, it's a good way, excuse me, of showing how nudging can be done to a positive effect and also implicating or identifying how you could be used, a game could be played with you in that regard. I know you said it's not games like throwing a dice, but to criminals, it is in a way. They look ahead, and I think part of what you're saying is right. Is game theory is about thinking 4 steps ahead, isn't it? That is the game application of it. If you want, it's knowing that this might relate, especially in behavioural terms. This will relate to that, which will relate to that, and the outcome could be this.
100%. But one of the, and if you're not used to thinking in this way, you might think, oh, well, Christ, that's so many things to be aware of. And on the one hand, it is. But in exploring those variables, you'll see, well, in this pattern and in this pattern, there are these similarities. So in the couple of similarities, you're covered for all of the eventualities that are connected to it. One of the slightly what's the most polite term, cheekier ways that we used to practice this when we were learning game theory. Now, please bear in mind that I as a hobby, I used to practice a performance arts of magic and mentalism and that type of thing. But I've always tried to put these principles to use because I'm having to go out and interact with people anyway, so I may as well practice them, right? That was kind of my thoughts. So I would talk to people about themselves, standard rapport building questions. My kids are probably sat up at night waiting for me. Have you got any kids? Yeah, okay. How old? And they tell me how old. And we'd have a little story about a family. I'm like, let me get into why we're here. We're talking about security and personal protection and situational awareness and cyber attacks, and we're doing these conventions. And I would say, so you talk to them about their protection methods. So have you got a PIN code on your phone? And they'd be like, yes, yeah. I'd be like, be honest, did you choose that number because it was easier to remember? I'm like, well, yes, of course I did. And so I'm already thinking, well, chances are they have chosen based on their kids' birthdays. It's a very common one, right? It's a very common one. And so when it was that I could borrow their phone and put in the year because they've already told me how old they are. So I get 2 tries depending upon the time of the year that we're talking to them at. And then I can show them that I can get all of their information through this game theory approach. I understood that this situation was built on openness. It was built on getting to know one another. It was built on, formalities and everyday conversations, friendliness. But that awareness from one person who knows the implication of data compared to one person who is maybe less aware of the implication of data, what can be done in those situations? One of the versions of the prisoner's dilemma that I like that you will be aware of, the Jasper Carrot game that was on ITV, Golden Balls. You ever see it?
Yeah.
Now, if you don't know this, guys, and you're listening, it was a great game show until the end, when the end was brutal. It was like a brutal version of the prisoner's dilemma. You've built up all of the money through playing the game. I mean, I'm about to pluck a number out of the sky. Let's say it was £10,000. You've built up £10,000 throughout the course of the game, and each person is now facing one another. There's 2 people left, and they have 2 golden balls in front of them. One opens to say split, and one opens to say steal. Now, if they both choose steal, they both get nothing. If they both choose split, they both split the £10,000 and get 5,000 each. But if one of them chooses split and the other chooses steal, well, then the person that chooses steal gets all the money, and the person that chooses steal gets nothing. And these types of situations, they pop up more and more and more and more when you think about it. And then you get into zero-sum and non-zero-sum games because, and I'm sure you'll have seen this as well, Bob, particularly with social media, and it popped into my head with you mentioning a certain American politician, is that if these ideas that if I disagree with you, I don't like you, or if you hold another point of view, you're clearly on the other side. These types of divisive versions of playing off ideas against one another. The understanding of game theory equips you to have at least the opportunity for productive conversations, because you can be aware of those implications ahead of time, and prepare for how to deal with those types of things. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I totally agree. Going back to the prisoner's dilemma, uh, having been in the police, I've been in them situations where you've got two people in custody, but it's not as over as you see on the TV. I've had it where I've just said to someone, I really admire your ability to trust the person you've been arrested with. And that's what you need to say, really. It is- But yeah, gamification is everywhere. And in fact, it's quite opportune that we're speaking today, because today is probably one of the day of the year that's marked in every fraudster's calendar, because it's Black Friday, isn't it? And I dread to think how much data, etc., people are unwillingly giving away on all of the social media channels, not exclusively, but like Amazon and places like that. And because that's how people work, isn't it? They get little bits of data, like you say, when you was a mentalist. It's people just don't realise what they're giving away.
That's it. That's it. And it's like I would be willing to bet that if you stopped a person and questioned them properly around their Black Friday purchases, they, particularly with Amazon, bear in mind, they would be aware, well, that the prices have been jacked up to be dropped to give the impression of
Yeah.
of the massive sale. I would bet they would be aware of that. So the game theoretic question then becomes, why double down on Black Friday and spend more? That's the question. So these principles, and granted, the prisoner's dilemma is just one of them, but these principles, they offer a way to draw out relevant questions. Whether you're looking at the 9 standards of thought or anything else, the prisoner's dilemma, it shows that even when cooperation produces the best outcome, fear of exploitation will drive people in towards self-protection. So that maps to like a suspect deciding whether to talk or not, witnesses choosing whether to disclose fully or not, teams choosing whether to share intelligence or not, officers deciding whether to intervene or not. In behavioral science, it's a dilemma that appears daily, but more often than not, it's unconscious. These decisions of whether to act or not. I'm sure you'll have seen from your police days as well the effects of the bystander effect. The watching of these things happening, and at least from an individual perspective, and the people that I've worked with and taught over the years, the deployment of these game theory principles, it offers at least an ignition to that way of thinking. To if it is that you're going down the realms of the Tversky and Kahneman work on biases, then if you are aware that there is a possibility that you are biased about something, having access to more direct questions towards the reason as to why is only going to benefit you as an individual. You would need to facilitate the delivery of that through ALF and other such properties of that when you're talking to other people. But when you're talking to yourself about these types of things, you can afford to be a little bit more direct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it does come down to knowing, doesn't it? You've got to really know, and you only get that by asking questions. But that in itself, because the thing about game theory is it's either going to have, like I say earlier, fuel or friction. Uh, and you've got to know who you're talking to and really know. And you only get that through sort of deeper questioning, Socratic questioning.
Yeah, 100%. This this when you look at classical game theory assumes logic. Real humans, myself included, maybe yourself as well, we don't always behave that way. We're rife with biases, we're rife with emotional triggers, we are thinking about fear and threat appraisal, or time pressures, or ego, or reputation. These are the factors that we mentioned that are connected to behavioral economics. It is saying, like, Chip Connolly had a good interpretation of behavioral economics with his emotional equations. In that, if you add happiness to surprise, what do you get? How do you divide rage? What is the composite parts of that? The behavioral economic studies, again from Kahneman, but there were a couple of other people attached. This is Daniel Kahneman of Thinking Fast and Slow, but there were a couple of other people attached whose names escape me. But this work shows that humans systematically violate the optimal strategy, systematically, and the term that came out of that was bounded rationality. Humans have a limited time, access to limited data, limited cognitive bandwidth. So it becomes natural, as a natural resource for us, to use heuristics, shortcuts, biases, which then can create predictable decision. Like, I would imagine, based on our discussions so far, someone would be able to develop a game, as in the game theory way, to facilitate a discussion with us about politics.
Yeah.
Right? If you've been paying attention, and you can facilitate that one way or the other. Do you want to create a political discussion that will end favorably, or do you want to create a political discussion that will end in arguments, or some kind of meeting in the middle? We've given you subtly, I mean, maybe even overtly, but we've given you information with regard to some of the thoughts, feelings, and ideas that we have already. You know this. You might not be aware that you know it, but if you think about those particular points and what it means as an implication, you can craft a situation in the same way that in an interview, when you choose to sit at opposite sides of a table to one another, you're creating an adversarial position. But if you choose to sit in support, like someone at the head of the table and someone just at the side, or even better yet, get a round table, right? Let's not have any barriers. Let's get rid of the table altogether if we can. This is the thinking of the game theoretician. I'm not even sure if that one's a word. I'm used to game theory and game theoretic approaches. Let's craft it if it isn't the game theoretician thinking. Yeah, I mean, other than political discussions, what have you seen on the daily? The daily that suggests that games within the game theory angle are being played. Whether they are being played overtly or not is not the point of the question. But where have you seen those types of things? And
well, they're everywhere. They're everywhere, aren't they? They're like literally everywhere. But thinking about it, I can think back to one time, and I don't think I was even thinking, like consciously about game theory or anything. But in a negotiation. It was a pre-meeting, which was going to then turn into a negotiation at a later time. And I just said to the guy that was in this meeting, well, is there anything wrong with you just going and sitting next to the guy rather than sitting opposite him? And it completely changed the dynamics of the meeting. It made initially both parties very anxious, but I think it actually worked by sitting next to them. The negotiations definitely went better than they expected when that did occur. So, I think we're subject to it. And the game theory itself is that you can pull it apart and say, this is it, or you can just think of it in more holistic terms and thinks that what it just fits within everything else, behavioral analysis, all of that, whether it's individuals or groups, and influence and nudging, all of the other things, that are tools of trade for us. Game theory sort of fits neatly within them all and with them. So I think that's the problem. We talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about cognitive intelligence as disparate things, but they're not. On their own, they don't mean so much as they do as a whole. And game theory is certainly integral to what I do and what any other person involved in media or selling does as well. But maybe they're uninformed practitioners rather than informed practitioners.
Like think of question time. We could change that around to facilitate better discussions using game theory. Think of any news headline that you've seen on a paper that is designed to do certain things, other than communicate data, is designed to do certain things. If you look at the way films are marketed, they're designed to do certain things. If you look at the way people conduct themselves when going into areas of social rules, that's designed to do certain things. Like, you're supposed to queue here. You're supposed to go to the elevator or the lift here. You're supposed to walk on the outside near the road, and the lady is supposed to walk on the inside. Right? If you hold traditional values or whatever it is. Connecting it back to the prisoner's dilemma, most people in those scenarios, they defect is the term, but it's choosing the selfish option, not because it's rational, but because they fear betrayal. They're overweighing risks. They catastrophize. They assume that the other player thinks like them. There is an emotional miscalibration, and that's exactly what investigators are looking for when someone lies unnecessarily, or someone over-explains, or panics, or reveals more than they need to in those particular situations. And all we're simply saying is, from that, is consider that cause and effect goes far beyond the singular here and now, right? Just because someone is angry walking into the room does not mean that what's happening in the room made them angry. It can be the things that they've brought in after the fact, and the understanding of, like, the second order, third order, fourth order, and so on, of the effects. It is a difficult thing to do, but once you start exploring it, I mean, don't be wrong, it's only difficult in the same way that patting your head and rubbing your stomach can be difficult in the earlier stages, but you can do it with enough practice. And this is the same thing. It's like thinking of multiple things at the same time. So, as we do when we come to the end of every discussion, what final thoughts would you like someone to take away from this rudimentary look at game theory?
Well, I would just say that look at game theory. It's very important, and it does help quantify behavior. Um, but don't give it enough prominence that you disregard other things, because that's what the rabbit hole that people go down. They they go down one and forget that there are so many of these theories that just knit together. And it's like knitting a jumper. You can't knit it with just one thread. You have to have loads of them, because then you get a nice pattern jumper. And that's what we all want. We want that pattern jumper. So I think it's one of the major parts of behavior and behavior analysis and behavioral intelligence, but it's by no means the only. So look into it, especially look into it in behavioral terms if that's what you're here for, because I think you'll be surprised of how it knits together so many disparate parts.
Absolutely. Nothing else to add from me because that was beautiful, other than to say, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, now is the time to do that. If it is that you've gained anything, even the slightest bit of enjoyment from these, it's the wonderful game to play by showing us that this is working for you, and we can bring you more and more and more as time marches on. But with that in mind, we will love you and leave you, and we'll see you next week for another one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.